Week 17 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 12 defense DST units. I'm ranking this week number 1, the San Francisco 49ers. So I know the Niners last week, it was a tough ball game for them versus the Baltimore Ravens. But this week, a great matchup at the Commanders. I have one of the worst offenses in the league. They give up the most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And after a bad game by that 49er defense, even though their offense put their defense in bad positions, I think they go out there set at the quarterback position. And we know this Washington Commander offensive line as well is one of the worst in the league. So I think a bunch of sacks, a few turnovers as well in this game. And I got San Francisco at 1, number 2, the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills, they've been righting the ship over the last month of the season. And this week here, a good matchup versus the New England Patriots coming to town. I know the Patriots beat them earlier in the year in a shootout type of game. But right now, this Bill defense is playing good. Their offense is getting off to good starts and putting their defense in better positions. And I know this New England offense has played a little bit better over the last couple weeks, and Bailey Zapp definitely an upgrade over Mac Jones as the starting quarterback for this New England Patriot team. But I think the Bills can get pressure on Zapp early and often. You don't really have weapons at the wide receiver position, playing with Juju Smith-Schuster, Demario Douglas, Devontae Parker. Haven't had a great season. And Zeke Elliott, he's been decent in the backfield. But I think Buffalo, in this one, they know they need this game. Playoff opportunity on the line. And this week at home, I think this defense, after 2 good defensive performances for the most part in a row, they go out there and have another good one. Number 3, the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns, one of the best units in the leagues in terms of points and even creating turnovers over the last few weeks. I know last week the Texans had a little bit of a comeback towards the end of the game, but that was a lot of garbage time. And this week, a great matchup versus the New York Jets. Trevor Siemian at quarterback this week here for this Jet team. But Siemian and this Jet team got off to a hot start last week, and they almost blew the game and lost until a last-minute field goal won it for them. But anyway, Myles Garrett, one of the best pass rushers in the league. He could get pressure on Wilson and Siemian, whoever it's going to be. And this Jet O-line is a patched-up O-line as well with a lot of injuries and just bad blocking as well. So I think this Brown DST could go out there, create a few turnovers, get a few sacks, and wouldn't be surprising if they have a defensive touchdown as well. Number 4, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jaguars as a 1-week streaming option is a good option versus the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, one of the worst offenses in the league. I know last week they did put up 30 points versus the Green Bay Packers, but I don't see that happening 2 weeks in a row for a Panther team that on the season could barely score in the mid-20s all year. So Jacksonville, I know they're free-falling as well, losing 4 games in a row, but their defense still top 10 in creating turnovers, and I think they could get pressure on the rookie Bryce Young in this one. And the whole key for Jacksonville is getting out to a good start with a lead, and that hasn't been the case the last month of the season. But this week, I think they get off to a good lead, and they start teeing off on Bryce Young and this offense. And I think Jaguars as well create a few turnovers. Number 5, the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams is a 1-week streaming option as well as a pretty good streamer for fantasy owners. So Los Angeles going into New York. I know this Giant offense might be a little bit better. Rod Taylor starts in this game, and they made a comeback towards the end of that one as well at the Philadelphia Eagles. The team's been locked in over the last few weeks. Their offense obviously has been carrying them, but the defense, they're making stops when they need it. And this week, I think they could get pressure on Tyrod Taylor. This New York Giant offensive line as well is one of the worst O-lines in the league here. And Turnovers as well. So this week, I think Los Angeles, led by Aaron Donald, even though I know an MVP type player like he was is Donald, but he's still one of the better pass rushers in the league. He still create havoc. And we know this Giant team, they got a lack of receivers as well. So I think Los Angeles, their DST has a decent game this week. Number 6, the New York Jets. So the Jets going to Cleveland. And I know this Cleveland offense, led by former Jet Joe Flacco, is really putting up points and going up and down the field over the last few weeks. But this Jet DST, one of the better units in the league. That for the most part, they've held the offenses down a lot this season. I know last week, 28 points by Washington, but Washington got in some good positions later in that game on the field. So right now, I think the Jets lock in Thursday Night Football. I know these games usually are shootouts, but for the most part, both these teams are defensive type of teams here in this one. And Amari Cooper, after coming off a monster game, I would think the Jets would put Sauce Gardner on him the whole game and not just have Gardner play one side. So if they could stop Cooper in this one, I think this Jet DST could put up decent numbers this week. Number 7, the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs, it wasn't their defense that was the problem. It was the offense turning the football over. Echo fumbling a football, Vegas scoring, and then a pick 6 Mahomes throwing. Uncharacteristic like him. But this week, this Chief defense, another decent matchup versus Cincinnati Bengals. I know Jake Browning, for the most part, has gone out out there, and he's played good football for Cincinnati, and he's even been a fantasy option over the last few weeks here. But Kansas City, they need this ball game after a bad loss last week in a game they should have easily won, going into being a 10-point favorite in that one. But anyway, Kansas City turns the page, another home game at Arrowhead, and this offensive line as well as Cincinnati's banged up, and also we don't know if Jamar Chase is going to play. So Kansas City, after coming off a bad ball game, and they usually bounce back with a victory after a loss. This defense, after last week, they played good D until they tie it out at the end, being on the field a lot. Goes out there and puts in a decent performance. Number 8, the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks, their DST has been a hit-or-miss type of unit all season for fantasy football. But this week I'm playing the matchup with them versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. This Steeler offense, I know last week went up and down the field with Mason Rudolph at quarterback and George Pickens, a monster game, 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. But this is the 12th man in Seattle, and the Seattle team, they're playing for their playoff lives as well. Last week, squeaking out that ball game at the Tennessee Titans, but I think Seattle could get pressure on Mason Rudolph early and often. This Steeler O-line isn't really all that great, and their running game hasn't been that great as well this season. Najee Harris, his numbers aren't all great. I know Jalen Warren, yards per carry have been good, but his touches have been on and off over the last few weeks. I think Seattle could get pressure on Rudolph. If their offense could get off to a good start versus Pittsburgh, that's where Pittsburgh's become one-dimensional this season, and that's where DSTs have teed off, so I got them as a decent option this week. Number 9, the Las Vegas Raiders. So the Vegas Raiders, their defense over the last few weeks has definitely played good ball. Versus Minnesota a few weeks ago, they lost that game 3-0. Then 63-21, they beat the Chargers, where that was garbage time where the Chargers scored their points. And then last week, to hold Patrick Mahomes and that offense down, including scoring 2 touchdowns defensively. This Raider defense is going out there. They're making plays, and their unit this week has a decent matchup with the Indianapolis Colts. And if Michael Pittman's out, that even adds on more that this Raider team could put on the board for fantasy owners. So I know the Raiders haven't been a great defense over the last few seasons, but this year they've actually had some games where they've gone out there and made plays, and Gardner Minshew, I know, has had a pretty decent season for this Indianapolis Colts team, but I still think Las Vegas could go into Indianapolis, make a few plays, stick to the same type of game script like they did versus the Kansas City Chiefs in terms of their defense calls in their formations. Number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles. I know the Eagles DST this season, they've been a train wreck, surprisingly, giving up a lot of points, winning a lot of shootouts, and wide receivers and quarterbacks have had good games versus Philadelphia DST. But this week, a good matchup with the Arizona Cardinals coming to town. Kyler Murray, so far since his return from the ACL injury, it's been a mixed bag of results. Some good games and some games where he didn't do much, and we know he turns the football over and at times take some big hits as well. So Philadelphia trying to wrap up the NFC East, still in the hunt now after San Francisco got blown out to take the first seed. And I think this defense gets fired up in this one and can make a few plays. And at number 10, they're a decent option. Number 11, the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens last week, they weren't even on the list because I thought versus that 49er offense, it was going to be a tough sledding type of game for this defense. But they went out there and they caused havoc in a big way. 5 interceptions in that game, a few sacks, and they held that offense down to 19 points, was this Baltimore DST. So this week, another high-powered offense coming to town time with the Miami Dolphins with Tua, Tyreek Hill, but Jalen Waddle possibly might be out of this game after he got banged up once again with a shin injury versus the Dallas Cowboys. Just find ways to get to the quarterback, hold their opponents mid-teens, low 20s for the most part this season, and also as well, they've created a lot of turnovers. So this week, I like Baltimore even in a tougher matchup to crack this top 12 in the 12th and final defense DST. I like this week's the Denver Broncos. I know last week they had a plus matchup on paper versus the New England Patriots, one of the worst offenses in the league, and the Patriots went in to Denver and won that ball game 26-23. But Denver, they created a couple turnovers in that game, had a couple sacks, and this week I think they could make a few things happen in this one where Los Angeles Chargers are coming to town. And obviously Justin Herbert's out for the season, and Easton Stick, he's been all right for this team, but I think they could get pressure on him in this one. Denver, I know their playoff hopes are most likely done now after losing last week's ball game, but I like their DST versus division rival, this Los Angeles Chargers team, and I could see this ball game, to be honest, between these teams, mid-teens, low 20s. So right now, I like Denver DST to fill out the top 12. So that's the top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.